We have stable economy situation. You can see on our markets, they are rising today, and yesterday they rose.
In Russia, if you will send long-range missiles to Ukraine, they gonna use it.
A fight for change that will define this year, next year, and indeed every waking hour of this government.
3 weeks ago, I spoke with a senior NATO official who warned me that Starmer's approach to Russia was creating serious concern among alliance members. Yesterday, those concerns materialized in the most public and humiliating way possible, with a Russian leader openly threatening British forces on live television. This isn't just about a prime minister being embarrassed on the world stage. The unprecedented nature of this direct confrontation signals a dangerous shift in Russia's willingness to tolerate Western rhetoric. The carefully maintained diplomatic channels that have prevented direct conflict for decades are now showing serious signs of breakdown. What if I told you this wasn't just another political spat, but potentially the most dangerous diplomatic incident between Britain and Russia in decades? The words chosen by Russian MP Ivan Popov on state television weren't merely harsh criticism. They represented a calculated escalation that sent shockwaves through diplomatic channels. When Popov declared British troops as direct targets for missiles, he crossed a line that even during the tensest Cold War moments was rarely breached in public forums. This confrontation didn't materialize from thin air. Starmer's recent statements supporting Ukraine with "whatever it takes" rhetoric and his casual mentions of Britain's nuclear deterrence created the perfect diplomatic storm. Moscow seized upon these statements, viewing them not as standard political posturing, but as dangerous provocations from a leader they increasingly see as unpredictable. What makes this televised threat so unprecedented is how it shatters established diplomatic protocols.
We are not aggressor. We are defending our land, defending our people, defending Russian language, defending Russian culture, defending Russian state.
All people in Russia are against the war, but now we can negotiate with Ukrainian people.
Children starting school ready to learn. A more secure energy system.
Typically, nuclear powers communicate threats through carefully coded diplomatic channels, not blunt public declarations on state television. Former British ambassador to Moscow, Sir Anthony Brenton, called this an extraordinary departure from the careful language that has preserved peace between nuclear powers for decades. The timing reveals Russia's strategic thinking. This public humiliation came just days after Starmer's meetings with NATO leaders in Brussels, where sources suggest he pushed for more aggressive measures against Russia. By striking when Starmer was attempting to build consensus, Moscow deliberately exploited what they perceived as fragility in the alliance. According to senior diplomatic sources speaking on condition of anonymity, the Kremlin views Starmer as a political novice playing with fire and dangerously overestimating Britain's position. One source revealed that Russian officials privately mock Starmer as the lawyer who thinks he can negotiate with missiles. This confrontation bears striking parallels to last month's tense exchange between Trump and Zelensky, where established diplomatic norms similarly collapsed under pressure. In both cases, we're witnessing a fundamental shift in how major powers communicate, moving from behind-closed-doors diplomacy to public arena provocations that leave little room for face-saving compromises. The most alarming development is how this confrontation has affected Britain's standing with NATO allies.
I'm convinced that if we can show that politics can change Britain for the better, then we can face the future with confidence.
It's unacceptable. British troops will be direct target for our missiles.
And we are kind of ready to meet your new high-technology weapon on Ukrainian battlefield.
Several European defense ministers have privately expressed concern that Starmer's approach could destabilize the carefully calibrated European security framework. One senior NATO official noted that allies are now questioning whether London can be trusted not to unnecessarily provoke escalation. This diplomatic isolation reveals a dangerous contradiction at the heart of Starmer's Russia strategy. For all his bold declarations about standing up to Moscow, Britain lacks the military muscle to back up such rhetoric, creating a precarious situation where tough talk might actually heighten the nation's vulnerability rather than strengthen its position. The stark reality is that Britain's armed forces, once the envy of the world, now find themselves dwarfed by Russia's military might, especially its nuclear arsenal. The numbers tell a sobering tale that few in Downing Street seem willing to acknowledge. The UK's defense capabilities have been steadily shrinking, while Russia maintains one of the world's largest nuclear stockpiles. This creates an asymmetrical power dynamic that makes Starmer's confrontational approach particularly reckless. It's like watching someone challenge a heavyweight boxer while armed with nothing but bravado and good intentions. Behind closed doors, there's growing concern that Starmer's aggressive posturing isn't driven by strategic wisdom, but by domestic political calculations.
Give me a second if you're giving me that floor, because you don't want to hear us. You don't understand Russians.
We should get independent information, but I can tell you again, we not attacking civilian infrastructure in Ukraine.
For many people, it's hard to think about the future when you spend all of your time fighting to get through the week.
The need to appear strong and decisive to British voters may be pushing him toward a foreign policy that Britain simply cannot sustain, either militarily or economically. This disconnect between rhetoric and reality hasn't gone unnoticed by Britain's traditional allies. The post-Brexit landscape has further complicated matters. At precisely the moment when Starmer is attempting to project greater power on the global stage, Britain's diplomatic influence has diminished considerably. The irony is palpable. As Starmer raises his voice, fewer international partners seem willing to stand beside him. This isolation becomes even more problematic when considering the financial realities of supporting Ukraine. The UK faces significant economic challenges at home, making its grand commitments to Ukraine increasingly difficult to fulfill. Questions about the sustainability of Britain's military support grow louder as domestic economic pressures mount. The contrast between Starmer's approach and that of other European leaders is striking. French President Emmanuel Macron has emphasized a more cautious path forward, acknowledging Russia as the aggressor while being mindful of the risks involved in escalation. While maintaining strong private opposition to Russian aggression, leaders like Macron have avoided the kind of public provocations that seem to characterize Starmer's strategy.
As well as he knows World War II history, it will be a long and difficult dialogue with him.
Closer and closer to our borders, and Ukraine is a direct threat to our security.
So I want to be clear. Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
As tensions between Starmer and Russia reach alarming heights, history offers us a sobering reminder of how nuclear confrontations can be defused. The Cuban Missile Crisis, perhaps the closest the world came to nuclear annihilation, was ultimately resolved through direct communication and back-channel negotiations. Security experts now warn that the current trajectory could seriously destabilize European security, with the diplomatic guardrails that have maintained peace showing dangerous signs of strain. Starmer now faces a critical juncture where diplomatic channels may offer the only viable path forward. Despite the public humiliation, experts suggest he could engage in dialogue with Russia while maintaining support for Ukraine. A delicate balancing act that requires nuance rather than bombastic rhetoric. The coming days will reveal whether Britain can pivot toward de-escalation or if Starmer's administration will continue down this perilous path of brinkmanship with a nuclear power that has already demonstrated its willingness to cross established boundaries.